Hello students. In this lecture, we will talk about free trade versus protection debate. Most economists believe free trade promotes prosperity for all countries and protection is inefficient. We have already seen powerful case for free trade. We saw that it brings gains for consumers and that gain exceeds any losses that is incurred by the producers. So as a whole, the society gains and the total surplus increases when there is free trade. But there is a broader range of issues in the free trade versus protection debate. Let's review these issues. Two classical arguments for restricting international trade are the infant industry argument and the dumping argument. So what is the infant industry argument? The infant industry argument for protection is that it is necessary to protect a new industry to enable it to grow into a mature industry that can compete in world markets. The argument is based on the idea that comparative advantage changes or is dynamic and that on-the-job experience or learning by doing is an important source of changes in comparative advantage. So this argument is basically helping the new industries grow and to protect them until they have comparative advantage over other countries. However, the fact that learning by doing can change comparative advantage, it does not justify protecting an infant industry. Let's look at the reasons why. Firstly, the infant industry argument is not valid if the benefits of learning by doing accrue only to the firms in the infant industry. The people making the decisions are the ones who benefit. They take the future gains into account when they decide on the scale of their activities. But other countries or other parts of the economy do not benefit. So there is no need for government assistance to achieve an efficient outcome. So basically, although the infant industries get some benefits from this kind from protection, but this benefit only belongs to the infant industry itself. It does not help other industries or other parts of the economy. So there is no reason for the government to protect them, okay? Because it does not add to the societal surplus, okay? So it does not increase the net gain in surplus. Secondly, even if the case is made for protecting an infant industry, it is more efficient to do so by giving the farms in the industry a subsidy, which is financed out of taxes. Such a subsidy would encourage the industry to mature and to compete with efficient world producers and keep the price faced by consumers at the world price. So instead of using tariffs or quota to protect these infant industries, what government should do is provide subsidy to them. If they're subsidized, they will have some, they will be encouraged to produce more and to let the industry mature, and they will be able to compete with the efficient world. Now, the dumping argument. So what is dumping? Dumping occurs when a foreign farm sells its exports at a lower price than its cost of production. Dumping might be used by a farm that wants to gain a global monopoly. So what is a monopoly? A monopoly is when there is only a single supplier in the market. So if a foreign farm wants to become the single supplier in the market, what they might do is they might sell its output at a price below its cost to drive domestic farms out of business. This is called dumping. When the domestic farms have gone, the foreign farms takes advantage of its monopoly position and charges a higher price for its product. But there are powerful reasons to resist the dumping argument for protection. So although dumping is causing an unfair competition in the market, it is still not a good enough reason for protection. Why? Because firstly, it is virtually impossible to detect dumping because it is hard to determine a firm's cost. Secondly, it is hard to think of a good that is produced by a global monopoly. So even if all the domestic firms in some industry were driven out of business, it would always be possible to find alternative foreign sources of supply and to buy the good at a price determined in a competitive market. So although because of dumping, all the domestic farms are driven out of business, there will still be another alternative foreign source of supply. So there will still be competition in the market and the price will be determined by the competitive market. So it is very hard to find a product that has global monopoly because there is always an alternative source to buy and for which there is always competition in the market and the price will be determined by the competitive market. Thirdly, if a good or service were a truly global monopoly, the best way of dealing with it would be by regulation or by law. Such regulation would require international. There are many other new arguments against free trade and for protection. And most common ones are protection saves jobs, it allows to compete with cheap foreign labor, it punishes low environmental standards, and it prevents rich countries from exploiting developing countries. Some people think that protection saves jobs. International trade in textiles has cost tens of thousands of jobs in the US as textile mills and other factories closed. But tens of thousands of jobs have been created in other countries as textile mills opened there. And these tens of thousands of US workers who lost their job in textile mills got even better paying jobs than as textile workers because US export industries expanded and created new jobs. So more jobs have been created than destroyed through free trade. Although protection does save particular jobs, but it does so at a high cost. Some might think that protection is the only way to compete with cheap foreign labor. With the removal of tariffs on trade between the US and Mexico, people thought all jobs rushed to Mexico. However, the productivity of US workers in producing movies, financial services, and customized computer chips is relatively higher than the productivity in the production of metals and some standardized machine parts. The activities in which US workers are relatively more productive than their Mexican counterparts are those in which the United States has a comparative advantage. And both countries can make themselves and the citizens better off by producing what they have comparative advantage in. So basically, by free trade, both countries become better off because then the countries can produce what they have high productivity in. Protection punishes low environmental standards. Another argument for protection is that many poorer countries, such as China and Mexico, they do not have the same environmental policies that the first world country has. And because they're willing to pollute and first world countries are not willing to pollute, they cannot compete with them without tariffs. This argument for protection is weak. The best hope for cleaner air in Beijing and Mexico is rapid income growth, and free trade contributes to that growth. As incomes in developing countries grow, they will have the means to match their desires to improve their environment. Basically, they will afford to have a cleaner environment if they have more income growth. And the free trade contributes to that growth. Secondly, a poor country may have a comparative advantage at doing the dirty work, which helps it to raise its income and at the same time enables the global economy to achieve higher environmental standards. Lastly, whether protection prevents rich countries from exploiting developing countries. Well, child labor and near slave labor are serious problems that are rightly condemned. But by trading with poor countries, we increase the demand of the goods that these countries produce. And more significantly, we increase the demand of their labor. When the demand of the labor in developing countries increases, the wage rate also increases. So rather than exploiting people in developing countries, trade can actually improve their opportunities and increase their incomes. So why, despite of all the arguments against protection, is trade restricted? Why do we still have protections? There are two key reasons. One is tariff revenue and the other is rent seeking. Governments in developing countries have difficult time collecting taxes from their citizens. Much economic activity takes place in an informal economy with few financial records. So only a few amount of revenue is collected from income taxes and sales taxes. The one area in which economic transactions are well recorded and audited is international trade. So this activity is an attractive base for tax collection in these countries. And it is used much more extensively than it is in developed countries. Rent seeking. Rent seeking is the major reason why international trade is restricted. Rent seeking is lobbying for special treatment by the government to create economic profit or to divert some consumer surplus or producer surplus away from others. Free trade increases consumption possibilities on average, but not everyone shares in the gain and some people even lose. Free trade brings benefit to some and imposes costs on others, with total benefits exceeding the total costs. The uneven distribution of costs and benefits is the principal obstacle to achieving more liberal international trade. So that's all from week 7.